girlfriend of the Las Vegas shooter, arriving back in the U.S. overnight.
Police released brand new body cam footage showing their frantic search for the shooter.
We are getting a look into the hotel room itself, from which the gunman carried out the deadliest shooting in modern American history.
What was his intention? What was the plotting and planning? And was it indeed him alone?
They raided the house or finished cleaning up the house in Reno, Nevada. And what did they find? They found another cache of weapons.
47 firearms have been recovered. These firearms were recovered from 3 different locations.
President Trump heading to Las Vegas today to meet with first responders and victims. The worst mass shooting in modern American history.
It was the wings of angels. There were so many people that weren't wearing a gun and a badge and a fire uniform that came from nowhere to help.
Wow, this is a Fox News alert. The girlfriend of the Las Vegas shooter arriving back in the U.S. overnight. And she arrived, believe it or not, being pushed in a wheelchair.
Mary Lou Danley, returning from the Philippines, greeted by the feds after she landed in Los Angeles. She is now considered a person of interest as police and the FBI are trying to figure out what led that killer to commit the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history.
She might be our last hope. They also want to know what Danley knew as her family speaks out, saying the gunman sent her away so he could launch his attack. Or do we believe that, Steve, and take it at face value?
That's exactly right. And of course, here in Las Vegas, everybody wants to know exactly what kind of background she can provide to the FBI and local law enforcement. I mean, she lived with him for a while, so she could perhaps explain how he was able to amass so many guns, all of those, you know, and then there's the curious ammonium nitrate that was found in the car, in the house that they shared. That's the flight she flew in from the Philippines. Also, keep in mind, she was initially, shortly after the shooting, considered a person of interest, but then as soon as it was discovered that she was out of the country, they said, okay, we talked to her, she's not a person of interest, until suddenly that $100,000 was wired from his account to somebody in the Philippines, and she was in the Philippines until yesterday.
Well, his brother, Steve, who said he was a good guy, he said that you can condemn Steve for gambling. Steve took care of the people he loved. He made me and my family very wealthy, and he was trying to take care of you, or her, Mary Lou Danley, right, as he was descending into hell, his brother said.
But, as he did say, don't take this wrong, but $100,000 for a millionaire, for a millionaire, for a guy with this type of wealth is not a lot of money. Meanwhile, we don't know about her. We don't know about the family. We know very little about his family, except for he was not speaking to his other 2 brothers. The sisters of Mary Lou Danley weighed in last night on 7 News in Australia.
He sent her away so that he can plan what he's planning without interruptions. In that sense, I thank him for sparing my sister's life, but that won't be to compensate 59 people's life. No one can put the puzzles together, no one except Mary Lou, because Steve is not here to talk anymore. Only Mary Lou can maybe help.
So, Steve and Brian, we're reading so many stories about people in Las Vegas or in the gambling family out there in that area where you are, Steve, who said they knew him. The Starbucks employee where he consistently went for Starbucks every morning with Mary Lou said he continuously berated her in public, said it happened a lot. When she asked to use his casino card to buy something, quote, he said he would glare down at her with a mean attitude. You don't need my casino card for this. I'm paying for your drink just like I'm paying for you. She softly said okay and stepped back.
And just think, Steve, how much worse it could have been, because this guy who planned everything meticulously with the 3 cameras, one on a cart to see who was coming down the hall, and if he had all those guns and all that weaponry, how much worse he planned on making this night that has wounded 500 and killed 59, as we now tick up by 1. But thankfully, that security guard seemed to have disrupted his pace by showing up and getting in front, knocking on the door, and then getting shot through that door. And then soon after, he would kill himself. That was 9 minutes of carnage.
Yeah. All right, Steve, we have so many more stories to share. But first, Adam Housley is out there with you.
Yeah, he's following the rest of the investigation live in Las Vegas, continuously how it's unfolded. Adam, what do we now know?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, there's been some questions now as to the interview with the brother of the killer. There apparently has been some inconsistencies. I'm not sure how significant they are, but they clearly don't think that some of the comments made were as clear and concise and as accurate as they would like. But they also, at the same time, with Mary Lou Danley, say that she has been helpful. But one investigator told me, you know, that she had to have seen something. They believe that this man prepared for at least 2 months. That's the most recent information. That's the working theory at this hour. And we get that as yesterday the Sheriff's Department released their dramatic video of the tactical teams down here, literally to my left, responding to the scene. The tactical teams, there were, I'm told every tactical team member was called to work that night, understandably. Guys came in off vacation, they threw on their vests, they threw on their helmets, they came out to face gunfire. Take a listen.
Hit my head. Hey, go that way, go that way, go that way. Hey, they're shooting right at us, guys. Everybody stay down. Stay down.
Where's it at?
North of the Mandalay Bay. It's coming out of a window.
Get back! Get back! In some of that video you can see up in the corner, guys, you can actually see the flash, and the flashes off the buildings. You know, there's been some speculation about someone shooting from the 4th floor. I can tell you from walking over by that hotel, there is no glass broken on the 4th floor. And it's explained to me by investigators that's very easy to get confused. Obviously, in a breaking situation like that, people are panicked. And also with the mirrored buildings behind me, both of them are basically mirrored glass. You're going to see reflections. And in that video, you can see reflections off of the left side of the building. So it shows while some of these officers, as they were responding, had to ensure they were going to the right floor. Back to you guys in New York.
Wow.
That's exactly right. And Adam, one of the reasons why they thought that there was an active shooter at the Tropicana, which is right over there, is because of the sound and the way it bounces around. But Adam, unique perspective, so close to the Mandalay. That is because, as you can see, this crime scene tape behind me. You're actually inside the crime scene. Explain how your truck wound up there.
Well, when this happened, we had an intern. We were on the show with you guys actually that morning. We had an intern that called our desk in Los Angeles and said, "Hey, there's been a shooting in L.A. Do you guys know anything?" And I'm hiding in the basement of a hotel. We figured this is about 10 minutes after the shooting began. About the time the shots were still coming out here. They called me because we were in Vegas for OJ and said, "Hey, do you know anything about a shooting?" And we didn't, and all of a sudden I heard the siren. So we came in this way. I know Vegas a little bit. We cover a lot of stories here. We came in this kind of a back route and followed one or two of the tactical teams in. And we even asked them, "Hey, we're okay?" And they basically said, "Just stay back from us." And we let them do their work. We stayed back, and we kind of followed them all the way in and showed the work that these guys were doing, these men and women. And then people, as you guys know, started walking out. People that have been rescuing others, a firefighter from Los Angeles who pronounced at least 20 people dead. And we've kind of stayed here, Steve, from the beginning, making sure that we stay out of the way of law enforcement. They've moved us a couple of times, but that's why we're here. And I got to tell you, people criticize, always people are going to criticize in a situation like this, but we've seen some amazing work done, not only by off-duty folks that were here, by volunteers, but also by the on-duty police officers that are still out here working crazy hours to still ensure security in this city and at the same time ensure security here at this location where so many people were killed.
Well, Adam, thank you for your reporting. You know, Steve, Brian, Adam mentioned that authorities believe he might have been planning this for months. There's an article in the Daily Mail today where they interviewed a guy named Leo Miller. He's a fellow gambler, and he said a few months back, this guy, this killer was, or alleged killer, I guess, he was in the casino gambling, and he looked at the table, looked at everyone around the table, and he said, "I wish I could go kill my mom. I don't know why the hell she brought me into this world." He said when he was sober, he was a nice guy. When he started drinking, he didn't know what he was doing around the table.
Oh, man. There's also a story, you know, because people have suggested, why was he targeting this particular venue? Was it country music fans? As it turns out, apparently about 10 days ago, he tried to check into another hotel that would have overlooked another big concert, the Life is Beautiful concert, featuring Chance the Rapper and Lords, but apparently he couldn't get a room there. And then 10 days later, of course, and now it sounds like he probably checked in on September 27th to the hotel behind me. Meanwhile, here in Las Vegas, President Trump will be arriving later today. He is expected to meet with some of the survivors at the hospitals, and he's also expected to talk to some of the family members of the victims right here in Las Vegas.
Yeah, so the president's going to come out here, and he's also getting questions already about gun control. And he's getting questions about, you know, what kind of laws are you going to pass? And he says there's going to be time for that. We're going to look at that. And it's got some people or some Republicans who are concerned about gun rights a little worried that people are going to overreact emotionally. You want universal background checks? Well, this guy passed a background check. You want to stop selling guns illegally? This guy has legal. These guns are legal.
Right.
You want to stop the devices out there to make a semi-automatic and automatic? Well, it turns out this device is legal, and even putting it on a gun, according to ATF, is even legal. So there's going to be issues out here, but knee-jerk reactions to passing laws that wouldn't have helped is not going to help. But that's where the president might feel some pressure. I don't know if he's going to have a chance to meet with the press today, if you had a chance to look at his schedule, Steve, but I know he's going to want to deal with the families first.
Yeah, and Steve, the problem is with the gun control issue, people who do the right things and own guns and use them properly, their argument is, how can we defend ourselves against people like this? Because they're still going to do what they're going to do, many people would say. They're going to, you know, make a semi-automatic and automatic by putting these bump stoppers on them. So if they're going to come out with a semi-automatic or an automatic, I want to be able to protect myself.
Sure, and the other point that so many people here in Las Vegas are making in talking to law enforcement, it's like, okay, people are talking in the political world about more laws. What law would have stopped that man from going into that hotel with a bunch of guns concealed in bags? What law would have stopped him from killing all those people? Because remember, the windows didn't open. He used that hammer we saw in the pictures to crack open two sides of that two-bedroom suite that he had to shoot down on people. And now here in Las Vegas, over at the Wynn Hotel, they're starting to do some bag checks, and they're starting to wand some people, and it's making people feel just a little bit safer. But still, even here in Las Vegas, people are on edge.
No doubt, lives are changed forever.
And the president's got things that are on his plate that he couldn't possibly have foreseen, or no other president has been forced to deal with outside 9/11, a series of natural disasters followed up by this horrific crime. Steve, stay right there. At 12 minutes after the hour, a lot coming your way.
Meanwhile, the shooter's girlfriend is now back here in the United States. So what can investigators learn from her? Alan Dershowitz is live with what happens next.
And what he would ask her. And Mr. Las Vegas has a powerful message for the city about the shooter. Jillian's interview with Wayne Newton coming straight ahead.
The one thing that still angers me is that nobody can give a reason why this fruitcake did that.
"17 minutes after the hour, a Fox News alert. Overnight, the girlfriend of the Las Vegas shooter arriving back in the United States.
Mary Lou Danley, now considered a person of interest and met by the FBI down on the tarmac when she got off the plane. The big question now, what does she know and how will she impact this investigation? Here to weigh in on this is attorney and Harvard Law School professor and the author of the book that's right here on the set with us. It's called Trumped Up. Here's your book, Mr. Alan Dershowitz. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Dershowitz.
Thank you.
So we're wondering, we have so many questions about this girl. How did they, or his girlfriend, how did they lure her to come back to the U.S.? Do they just detain her and say, you're coming, or do they have to talk her into it?
They had to talk her into it. She could have resisted, and I think what they're trying to do is persuade her at this point that she's not a suspect, that she's just a source of information, and that she doesn't need a lawyer, she doesn't have to worry about what she said. If they can keep her as a person of interest, not as a suspect, they'll get a lot more information from her. If she begins to believe that she is a suspect, She's going to get a lawyer. The lawyers are then going to begin to play chess with the government. What do you have for me? What do I have for you? And it will become much harder to get information.
Professor, I don't know anything about her, but just any reasonable person would know that they will be in trouble, because if there's some sense that this guy pre-planned this, and they've been together constantly since then, she has to know fundamentally that she is being looked at by more than just a source.
But here's the way they should play it, and probably they will. They'll say to her, look, we don't think you knew at the time or you were suspicious of him, but now, in retrospect, with the benefit of hindsight, you've now seen the horrible thing he did. You must now remember things that may not have meant anything to you then, but will mean something now. So tell us, did he get any calls from foreign sources? Was he on the internet? All of those kinds of questions.
Where's the money? Where's the $100,000? It didn't necessarily go to her with the tens of thousands prior to that.
We don't know that. Wired to the Philippines. It might have been wired into her.
The sheriff wouldn't answer the question.
Her sister said that she didn't know anything. She was sent away by him at the last minute. He called her and said, I found a cheap ticket to the Philippines for you. The sisters live in Australia. Could her defense be, because we've got the Starbucks employee saying he berated her constantly. He was always talking down to her, saying, I'll pay for your drink just like I pay for you, making her feel terrible. And she would kowtow to him and stand behind him and say, okay. Do you think her defense could be, this guy, clearly this guy is evil, not a good person? Could she say, you know, I was too scared to stand up to him?
Well, I think they're going to use that as leverage. They're going to say, if they have to get to the point where they have to use leverage, they're going to say, look, we can make a case against you. $100,000, that might have been hush money. You had to suspect something. This is months in the planning. But if you completely and fully cooperate with us and tell us everything, stretch your memory, we'll give you a deal.
What would you recommend if she were your client for her to do in that situation?
I hope she doesn't get a lawyer for purposes of getting more and more information. But if I were her lawyer, I'd have to tell her at the moment not to cooperate, to wait until we can make a deal, get formal immunity, both from the federal and state government. If you're a lawyer, you have to look out only for the interests of your client.
Right. Thanks, Professor.
Thank
Thankfully, you're not a lawyer, because we need to get information. Coming up straight ahead, we're learning more about the shooter, but the biggest question still remains, so why don't we know more? And it's been 3 days.
Back to the latest on the Las Vegas massacre in just a moment, but first some other news stories making headlines, starting with this Fox News alert. Brand new video, look at this, showing the Chelsea bombing suspect wheeling suitcases through New York City just moments before a pressure cooker exploded last year, sending people running for their lives. The videos revealed at the time of at the trial that Ahmed Rahimi accused of hurting 30 people in that blast. Also breaking right now, 15 Cuban diplomats kicked out of Washington. The State Department order comes after a series of mysterious attacks sickens at least 22 Americans, some with hearing problems, others with brain damage. Cuba is denying any responsibility. And another business pulling its TV ads from the NFL games after weeks of players protesting the national anthem. The owner of Flemington Car and Truck Country dealerships in New Jersey are upset that the league has no policy to ensure players respect the American flag. Okay, we're going to send it out to Steve in Las Vegas.
All right. Ainsley, thank you very much. More than 48 hours after the Las Vegas massacre, law enforcement officials have yet to figure out the motive, saying only he was obviously premeditated in his actions.
This individual was premeditated, obviously premeditated. The fact that he had the type of weaponry and amount of weaponry in that room, it was pre-planned extensively, and I'm pretty sure he evaluated everything that he did in his actions, which is troublesome.
So why don't we know more? Former Las Vegas police officer and national spokesperson for the American Council on Public Safety, Randy Sutton, joins us live here outside the Mandalay Bay. Lieutenant, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Clearly it was premeditated. I mean,
yes.
Just the fact, have you ever seen a situation where somebody, we know that he had plenty of ammo out there, but he had 2 cameras outside the room, and one of the people as well.
You know, the fact that he was so well prepared, that he had this amount of tactical experience, really shows that he was planning this for a very long time. Those cameras that he put on a service cart outside were. This was very, very smart of him, because it alerted him when law enforcement or security was closing in on him.
And speaking of law enforcement, every one of the patrolmen had a body cam. Yesterday at the late press briefing, they actually showed some of the body cam video. And it is so stunning when you look, Randy, at the video and you hear what the guys were going through. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable.
A lot of the radio traffic that I did hear also showed the amazing professionalism of not just the police officers that were there, but the dispatchers. The dispatchers are the unsung heroes here. You heard the amazing restraint and the calmness as they did their job.
He fired up to 11 minutes. This is just, it's hard to watch knowing what happened. In the fact that there was so much premeditation, why don't we know what the motive is at this point? We know he wired $100,000 to the Philippines. We don't know exactly who at this point. We know his girlfriend is a person of interest. She now is in the custody of the FBI. She's talking to him. I shouldn't say custody. But why don't we know the motive yet?
You know, this is really interesting. This is unlike every other mass shooting we've had, where the individuals really portrayed what their reasoning was, because that was part of their deal. But this guy's truly the boogeyman. Nobody knows yet. You know, he had no digital footprint that they've discovered yet. He literally came out of nowhere. He's a successful man. He's financially successful, which was one of the reasons how he was able to finance this massacre. But truly, as this thing unfolds, the only answers are going to be through a serious investigation into, as they get into his devices, his phone, his computer, and perhaps that's where the answer lies. Because right now, they may know a little bit more. I think they're being very transparent about what they do know, and it's not very much.
All right. And of course, yesterday, a sad day, they were talking about down at the police station about an officer that you lost, Charleston Hartsfeld. I know you had met him, you knew him as well. Supposedly one of the greatest guys ever.
Everyone speaks about this young man as a true professional. Not only did he serve his country in the military for a number of years, but then with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. In fact, he even wrote a book about being a public servant.
Memoirs of the public servant.
Which shows you the dedication that this young man had. He leaves a family behind and all his brothers and sisters within law enforcement.
And he was just off duty. He was just there watching the show.
But you know, and here's what's interesting. Like many of the other off-duty law enforcement personnel, fire department personnel, military that were there, the sheriff made particular mention that when the bullets were raining down, this officer sprang into action, and he began to do his job as a cop, and that's what is expected of him, and that he didn't let anybody down.
That's right. Also, the sheriff yesterday said the official body count of the number of victims was 58. Then 59 with the shooter. But overnight, yesterday afternoon out at Sunrise Hospital, one more person who had been in critical condition passed away. So now the death toll is at 60, including the shooter.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that death toll rises.
All right. Lieutenant, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All right. Meanwhile, we are in Las Vegas, and coming up, Mr. Las Vegas, Wayne Newton has a powerful message for his city about the shooter. Jillian's got an interview with Wayne coming up next. And Congressman Steve Scalise speaks out to Fox News why he says what happened to him and the tragedy in Las Vegas has strengthened his views against more gun controls.
Just feeling that impact, I said, I think I was just shot. It felt like a huge baseball, just the force of it going through my stomach. And then I looked down, there's blood everywhere, and I knew I was shot.
So people are collapsing. Some people in an instant, they were dead.
You'd run one way and you just see rounds hitting the ground, and then you just run the other way, and then there are 10-foot fences, and people just, we're mice in a maze.
Sean Hannity interviewing some eyewitnesses last night and bringing that front and center. A lot of them are just, Steve, a lot of them are actually coming to grips with what they experienced. And a lot of people in war say the same thing. They go through a battle, and a couple of days later is when they start feeling the emotions of knowing that their life was in the balance as reality sets in.
Yeah, I'm sure, Steve, they'll have PTSD, many of them replaying what happened on Sunday night.
Just every time they hear a loud noise or anything else, it's just natural. You know, what's interesting is when you put into perspective what they have gone through, and it's going to take a very long time for them to process because they are still certainly in some sort of shock, is somebody who 3 months ago went through a shooting situation with somebody with a high-powered gun, with Steve Scalise. Steve Scalise talked to Martha last night here on the channel, and what's interesting about his point of view, while so many people in Washington are talking about, you know, we're going to do something to rein in the NRA and things like that, Steve Scalise actually says that the shooting that happened to him, just like Las Vegas, has strengthened his feeling that we have enough gun laws. Watch this.
I think it's fortified it because, first of all, you've got to recognize that, you know, when there's a tragedy like this, the first thing we should be thinking about is praying for the people who were injured and doing whatever we can to help them, to help law enforcement. We shouldn't first be thinking of promoting our political agenda. And I think we see too much of that where people say, okay, now you have to have gun controls. And frankly, what I experienced was when there was a shooter, luckily we had Capitol Police there with their own guns. Every single day in America, regular citizens that just have a passionate belief in the Second Amendment, that have their own guns, use guns every single day to protect themselves against criminals. And those stories never get told or hardly ever get told. But that's a different side of the story that I think is important.
What's worthy of this whole debate is that the reason why more people weren't shot and harmed and killed was because there were two people there with guns. And the reason why maybe so many terrorists overseas are having success in England and in France is because so few do have guns. So there's an argument to be made on both sides. Also thought it was interesting that Tony Schaefer, who does a lot of CIA work in terms of investigations, said that the shooter that shot Steve Scalise is remarkably similar to what we know so far about this shooter that shot so many in Las Vegas.
That they just want to kill, just mass people. You know, Steve, we were talking about gun control, and if you look at the people, there are more people that know how to handle guns, that own guns, that do the right thing, than there are people like this guy. So you hate to punish those people who need to protect themselves from a crazy man like this, or some dad who's teaching his son to hunt deer down in South Carolina. You know, so maybe there's a compromise here. Could we talk about maybe making those, what are they called, the block stoppers that change a semi-automatic into an automatic?
The bump fire stocks.
Could they make these illegal? I mean, in and of themselves, they're not dangerous, but if you attach them to one of the semi-automatics, they are.
Right. Meanwhile, Steve, you are there with Jillian, who talked to somebody who really feels this hurt personally in Las Vegas.
That's right. We had a little while yesterday to talk to Wayne Newton. You know him. He is Mr. Las Vegas, right? A huge person to this city. We did the interview, and afterwards we just spent a lot of time actually sitting down talking to he and his wife about what Las Vegas means to them. They know this is a place where people come to escape, to kind of forget about what's going on in their life, to have some fun. Right. And you could tell he was really affected by this. Take a look.
My first reactions were anger, obviously. As the investigations go on, we find out more and more, but the one thing that still angers me is that nobody can give a reason why this fruitcake did that. Your first reaction again is, will that define Las Vegas from this point on? And having thought it through, I don't believe it will. I know Las Vegas will recover from it. It's a terrible, terrible thing, and our sympathies and prayers go out to all the victims and those that are still fighting for their life. But we have survived other things in this town, and what happened Sunday night obviously could not have been nobody could even assume something like that would ever happen.
President Trump is coming to Las Vegas. Your thoughts on that?
My thought is I'm thrilled. I think he brings with him the attention of the world, and he he coming here is showing people that this is a great city and they're great people. I know that if anything good is learned, or if anything is learned that can be used in a meaningful and progressive way, it will be. But I think that this terrible thing could have happened anywhere to any city.
And I will tell you, he knew he was going to have a hard time last night, but he also knew he had to get the show going again, so he did perform last night. He said he has to be that outlet for people who still need to escape, because that's what Las Vegas is. And by the way, he and his family donated $100,000 to the victim. So I posted something on Twitter just saying this interview was coming up, and people say, good for him. He's not just talking the talk. He is a man who is creating action. He is doing this.
This is his town. And like so many people who we have met, and Jillian and I had lunch with Fox News contributor Bob Massey yesterday. The people in this town, Brian and Ainsley, are simply in shock. You know, this is a place where people go to have fun and get away from the real world. And as of Sunday night, this place just got way too real.
Yeah, and the people that live there don't usually go to the Strip. Like, for example, we don't usually hang out in Midtown Manhattan if you're in Manhattan, because that's where a lot of tourists go. Now they're all coming here saying, oh my goodness, this means so much to the state. What it's going to mean in the future, let alone all those struggling for their lives in area hospitals. Great job, Jillian. Steve, we'll check back with you shortly. Meanwhile, the new focus for investigators, the gunman's girlfriend and the $100,000 he wired to her home country, and tens of thousands prior to the last week. Where will the money trail take this investigation?
And out of the horror stories come stories of heroism. So what was it like running toward the danger? The first responders are going to join us live with their firsthand accounts. Now back to the latest in the Las Vegas massacre in just a moment. But first, some other news making headlines. Hotel employees in New York City getting police training now to recognize potentially dangerous guests. The NYPD is talking to security staff now and housekeepers on how to spot suspicious luggage like gun cases. And the latest data breach in history just got bigger. Turns out every single one of Yahoo's users, that's 3 billion people, were impacted. That is 3 times as much as Yahoo originally reported. The stolen information did not include card data or bank account information. And could it be a billionaire versus billionaire in the 2020 presidential race?
If I can come up with solutions that I think people can get behind and truly solve problems, then it makes perfect sense for me to run.
Mark Cuban making the reveal on former Democratic Congressman Bakari Sellers' podcast, but he is not ready to commit to a run just yet. Brian, down to you.
Thanks. It certainly seems like it, though. 15 minutes before the top of the hour, Fox News alert. The Vegas shooter's girlfriend landing in Los Angeles overnight, met by FBI agents on the tarmac as they try to figure out what she knew without getting her defenses up. And now we know the shooter wired $100,000 to her home country, but not necessarily her, and that country of the Philippines, just days before the mass murder. She also spent considerable time in Australia. So what could that tell us about the investigation? Here to weigh in, former CIA chief Daniel Hoffman, because this is an international story, Dan. And here's what I'm thinking. The fact that he likes to cruise and photos have emerged of him with her in 2012 and 2013 in the Philippines. If I'm putting you on this scene, on this crime, where are you going with this?
Well, you're right. The scope of the investigation has gone well beyond the forensics and the tragic loss of life in Las Vegas. It's in an international criminal investigation, and so I'm sure the FBI is engaging with law enforcement counterparts in Australia because the shooter's girlfriend had a passport from Australia. She was recently in the Philippines, in Hong Kong, in Tokyo, and we don't know where she's been before. So there's a lot of work to be done on the liaison front with the FBI.
So when we went international, I thought the CIA took over, but the CIA will play a role but still let the FBI lead?
This would be an FBI lead because of the criminal investigation. There's a custody of evidence that the FBI would want to hold, and it's more appropriate for them to do the work.
So we have the Philippines with this huge al-Qaeda presence, now an ISIS presence. What are you seeing if Abu Sayyaf, I guess, was born there,
right,
and which is a form of Islamic extremism? Do you shut down ISIS because they keep claiming again that this is our guy, our soldier, this is revenge for destroying our caliphate? What do you do with that?
So we don't know whether the shooter was connected with ISIS or not, and there's so many unknowns in this case, so much evidence and intelligence to collect. But ISIS has claimed it as their own, and I'm sure Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi sees a lot of propaganda benefit in doing so. Even if it's not true, he would hope to inspire his followers to conduct similar sorts of violence against the West. It was only back in May when terrorists attacked the Manchester concert in the UK, similar sort of a venue, and that's extremely disconcerting. It's very hard to protect an open-air concert. How you extend the safety perimeter to protect the civilians attending the concert, I think Al-Qaeda would take that lesson.
What stands out with you when you find out that he has 43 weapons at 3 different locations, and he had 23 guns and multiple bags of ammunition, including ammonium nitrate, in his car? This could have been a lot worse than 9 minutes of mass shooting.
Absolutely could have been. It shows that he had a tremendous amount of preparation. He may have...
They say 2 months. Does that sound right to you?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was quite considerably longer than that. He may have thought about this years ago and done lots of surveillance even on the net and determined which site he wanted to pursue. But the amount of weapons that he held certainly indicates he might have considered launching at other targets beyond the one that he chose ultimately.
I hate to think of it right now as we know it. This whole case hinges on this girlfriend. How do you get her not to put a wall of defenses up and open up?
Yeah, I mean, the FBI, I've seen them do this before. They're very effective at managing people of interest. And I have no doubt that they will collect lots of information from other sources and then proceed accordingly in interviews with her.
And one thing I do know is that if ISIS, Al-Qaeda didn't do this, they're certainly learning from this. They're studying our reaction, and they're studying, you know, where we go from here.
They'll study the incident response because Al-Qaeda likes to mount multiple spectacular attacks where first responders will show up at the first attack only to see that there are second and third attacks from there.
Daniel Hoffman, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, international perspective on a domestic crime. All right, 11 minutes before the top of the hour. Next, he was sleeping when his daughter called him and said, "Daddy, they are shooting." That first responder joins us live with what happened next. And